Friends, it feels like summer. It is warm, almost too warm in this apartment. The Netherlands is not known to have houses with air conditioning because it's so rarely warm. But we're surviving and thriving. The sun is shining, and I had a beautiful talk today with Andrea Hiott, who recently moved to the Netherlands. I saw her talk with Karen a while back. She connected with Karen in a funny way. You'll just have to listen to their talk to know in what way. But I saw a lot of points of conversion between her and myself in the way she thinks and what she thinks about. And so I felt compelled to contact her. And we had a really wonderful conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'd love to speak to her again. She has a degree in philosophy, I believe, with a thesis she did on Hegel, which made her want to go to Germany to learn German. And she studied neuroscience. And I'm just naming her academic accomplishments, but I think people are often so much more than that, and she definitely is. Her story is extremely intriguing, filled with adventure and different directions, and it shows in what kind of person she is. She's extremely multifaceted with a myriad of interests, and she's also just a really good listener, and it's been fun interviewing podcast hosts because she has her own, of course, the Love and Philosophy channel. She hosts a bunch of conversations there. Some of the people will be familiar to you guys, such as Ian McGilchrist, and I think she's spoken to Michael Levin as well. Yes. And yeah, so enjoy this podcast. I will link all of her work down below, and it's a lot. She's written books, and again, the channel is really, really cool. If you guys are into any of the thinkers that I've spoken about, you'll love her channel and her mind. And without further ado, here is the conversation. Welcome to the channel. I'm joined today by Andrea Hiott. Andrea, welcome to the channel.
Hi, Lucas. So nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I had to when I listened to your talk with Karen because there were so many points where I was like, I want to ask her about this and that.
Okay.
And I know that you recently moved to the Netherlands, which is my home country. So I figured, let's try.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, you responded. So as I told you offline, I'd like to start with a bit about your upbringing, anything you would be willing to share and you think is relevant to share. Yeah, tell us
Oh,
about that.
well, um, relevant towards what? What shall we orient towards? I feel like my background can be told a million different ways. Maybe that's where to start. Because as a kid, I moved a lot.
Mm.
Have you always lived in the Netherlands? Have you ever moved?
Always been here.
Yeah, okay. Well, we moved a lot when I was a child, and what started, I lived on a farm with my, not on a farm, but my grandparents had this giant farm, and sort of they had a lot of kids, and all the kids sort of lived around the farm. So it was a very small, quite religious actually, and loving community, but also came with a lot of difficulties when you live in a small community. So in any case, my dad wanted to leave this little world, as young people do at times, and he did, and he was very successful in a lot of different sorts of jobs. I always kind of compare it to like the corporate army because people always say, "Were your parents in the army?" No, but we did move like that, kind of every 3 years for a
Mm.
while, starting when I was in about fifth grade. I don't know, how old are you here? I guess it's kind of fifth class, right? Like,
Sorry.
what is fifth grade like?
Oh, yeah, that's like seventh grade here.
Okay,
So
yeah,
that's
it's a little
like
different.
uh I would be like 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Starting
So-
around that age, kind of when you're waking up to life a bit, we started moving almost every 3 years. And so to bring that back to why I said I could start many places is that sort of taught me. I thought the world was one particular way, and then
Mm.
you move into a new world, a new environment, and like maybe at the old school, a certain kind of pair of shoes was cool. And then you go there and you're like wearing the pair of shoes and people think that's not cool, or
Yeah.
that's a really general assumption. But what it showed me in all kind of levels, on those more surface levels, which unfortunately matter a bit when you're a little kid, but
Hmm.
on more personal levels too, even with like waking up to different ways of thinking about philosophical ideas as much as you can when you're 10 years old. I learned from all that moving that there's so many different ways of being in the world. And I think it actually had a lot to do with forming me, and the way that I am. So when I look back at my life, I could tell it in so many different ways, and none of them would be totally accurate in the sense that they couldn't, account for all that richness, but all of them would be sort of right from a certain orientation. So I don't know, maybe it's interesting to ask you what interests you, and then I could tell it from that angle.
Yeah, it's always so much to be able to tell. I notice with my guests.
Yeah.
What do you actually want to know? I don't know. I like to get the idea of people. I like to understand who they are, who they were, what remained from who they were. So, for example, philosophy is something that you tell me you were interested in already.
Mm-hmm.
As it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what were you thinking about when you were that age?
Um, it's funny. I was just thinking earlier today because I was trying to think about something to do with why I got interested in hippocampus stuff, and it sort of brought me back to this moment when it was very close to this time when we first moved because we had just moved about 45 minutes away from where my grandparents lived on both sides of my family, and for me, of course, that felt like hundreds of miles away. Um, but my grandfather passed away, and uh, I think that was a philosophical awakening for me, which of
Mm,
course I didn't think of it as a 10-year-old or 11, however old I was at the time. But what happened was I realized there's life and death. And we
mm,
all realize this in ways. I'd realized it earlier with animals that I loved that had gone away, but that was just more like full on grief and completely not understanding at all what happened, because it was either something kind of violent, like my favorite dog got hit by a car. I mean, that was, I like locked myself in my room and couldn't come out.
mm,
But I was just too little to think of it very deeply. But when that happened, maybe even also because we'd moved and it had awoken my consciousness in a way, I thought of it in a different sense. And I guess that's kind of the philosophical thread. And I remember very well, like we stayed with my aunt the night before the funeral. And of all my grandparents, this was the grandparent I was probably not as close to because I was really close to my other grandparents
mm.
for different reasons. But it really affected me. I always loved him very much. And yeah, I remember sitting in the bed and trying to understand like how can someone be here and not be here? And it felt very intense to me. And I wrote this poem like I don't, and also it had to do with my pain. Like, also my pain was there and not there because
Mm.
I felt so sad and in pain and I couldn't touch it. So it was like the same, it felt like a similar uh, contrast that was also like opening me to a different way of being in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I read this poem like, how can something hurt so much that you can't feel or reach out and touch? It was one of these like, total little like kid poems, but
Yeah.
it was pretty, deep about that stuff. And I
Yeah.
guess that was kind of philosophical thinking for a kid. And it helped me. I think that's the thing, right? Why do we do all this? Why do you have all these conversations, read these books? It was almost like it gave me a portal to step back to like a third space. We both talk about twos and threes and dichotomies a lot. It gave me a way to look at it and feel it without being overwhelmed by it. Also, I think I read it to my parents in the car and they like pulled over and started crying. And it was this kind of whole just it opened me up to what ideas can be when we try to talk about them and express them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a really beautiful answer. Were you
Mhm.
a happy child generally?
It's a funny question. Yeah, I mean, I'm told I was happy. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of this is what people tell you. I'll tell you what I remember too, but people always told me I was very good, very sweet, very happy. The teachers always wanted to like I was very quiet, I think. and but present, something like
Mm.
that's how they say. So there's something about that my teachers always liked, probably just because I was quiet and listened. Um, but from my own perspective, I do remember being happy, but I remember it's funny how memory is. It's something I think about a lot. I think I don't know if you do too, but you tend to remember these moments that are dramatic, like the one I just told you about my
Yeah.
grandfather and stuff. I do remember the joy of playing, riding my bike, being on the farm, like kind of just exploring, those moments where you go a little bit farther than you're supposed to go as a kid,
Mm.
climbing trees. I remember those kind of moments as joyful. But the ones that stick out are more like the one I told you about my grandfather, or
Yeah.
these moments I would have with animals. I mean, this might sound kind of silly, but I remember like I would kind of go hang out with the cows and or the whatever and try to figure out like why they're in cages, and because they had this huge pasture to run free. They were treated very well. They weren't actually in a cage, but yeah, these kind of moments I remember
Yeah.
of like trying to understand what all that is. I remember I ran away once, like packing my little backpack, and it
What
was
made
all
you
for
run away?
show. Huh?
What made you run away?
I don't know. That's the like I think I was sad about something, or maybe what I remember is that the way I felt wasn't being seen by anyone.
Hmm.
When you're a kid and you feel like,
Yeah, actually
do
really
you
relate
remember
to
some of
that.
that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. A lot of it actually.
Really?
Just yeah, just being feeling like people really don't get you or
Mm.
what you're going through.
You have a lot of brothers, right? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
I have three brothers and two sisters.
Oh, a lot of siblings, gosh.
What
So
about
that's
you?
hard too when you have so many people in your family and
Yeah, and I'm like the
mm.
fourth, so the first two they get a lot of attention and the last two get a lot of attention.
Oh, and you're in the
So
middle. That's always a harder. Well, I have friends who are the middle children, and they say it feels like a little like you can be like invisible or something at times. But maybe all
yeah.
kids feel that. I don't.
But I was also sometimes pretty dramatic, so I get plenty of attention, I guess.
Ah, okay.
I
That's a way
but
to overcome that
yeah, I
not being
think so,
seen.
but it's really my memory is really foggy from my childhood. So
But you know that feeling that
yeah,
that's the feeling I remember. Who knows what caused it, but just feeling like, hey, I am feeling these things and nobody sees it. And
yeah,
I'm gonna run away. And it was a total show. I do remember that. I'm aware enough of myself. I was aware enough of myself to know I didn't really want to run away.
mm,
More, I wanted attention to people to say, "Oh, where's Andrea? Like, let's go find her." Or, "Oh no, she's gone. Something must be wrong." Um, and of course, no one even noticed that I ran away. I got like all the way to the end of this little neighborhood and it's like at the edge of the world, and I was scared and I came back. So I
yeah.
don't even think my parents knew I ran away, but I will tell you, I remember solving that with music.
Ah,
It
what kind of music?
was Lean on Me. Do you know this song? Bill Withers?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Okay. I had this little like CD player, and that was my first purchase, I think, with my whatever money. Who knows how in the world I found Bill Withers and Lean on Me. It's probably in some TV show or something.
Yeah,
Um, and I remember just putting that on and listening to that, and that made me happy again.
it's a
It's
nice
it's
song.
it's a wonderful song. And the music itself uplifts you, even if you can't understand what's all the things he's saying. But Lean on Me, I guess that is kind of poignant to that moment. But
Yeah, that's
did you
nice.
have anything like that? Music as a kid or
Yeah. I listen to a lot of music. It's really in phases. So like rock music was a big thing for me for a while.
mm,
Got really into rap music. Um,
like who?
for
What?
for rap, well, I would say, well, there's a lot of names that are more modern that a lot of people wouldn't know, more esoteric. But
Mm.
generally, like the old Kanye albums, I
Or even
love.
just a song that or a lyric or something. Can you
Song that
remember?
spoke to me.
Hmm. It's hard
It's
to
so
remember.
endless. You know, like I listened to so much music growing up. I find it really hard to pick anything out.
Maybe someone comes later.
My siblings are so I have some really musical siblings. Like my brother that I
Oh,
spoke to last week, he fed me basically all my music that I listened to. He's really interested in music, but also critically looking at it and what's
Mm.
good music. So he always tried to give me what he thought was good music.
Oh,
And that,
Aaron.
yeah, Aaron, yeah.
Yeah, I love the disc. I was telling you before you came on. We came on. I love that you two brothers do your talks together. It's
Yeah,
just so
he's sweet.
beautiful.
He lives
Yeah.
in Utrecht actually.
Ah, okay.
He's teaching philosophy there.
Wow.
There's like
Oh, how interesting.
he's not got a PhD yet, but he does it as like an assistant professor, I think.
Oh, wow. Good for him. He seems. I it doesn't surprise me really because he's got a very philosophical way approach, but also very human. You know, it's not sometimes in philosophy people are out of their bodies talking, but he's very in his body.
Yeah, you as well, no?
Anyway, he must have been a good influence, right? It's good to have like
Yeah,
a.
yeah, absolutely. I feel like he's always been someone that's tried to steer me into a good direction more and more
You're so
throughout my
lucky to
life.
have. I mean, he is too to have a brother who's like you that you can communicate with and talk and help each other and
Mm.
yeah.
Well, that's recent. Like I was a pretty bad kid, but
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah. Like
Mm.
out of all my siblings, probably the worst. If
Is it
you'd
part
ask
of
them,
that acting out thing you were talking about? Like,
I don't know. More the I'll go pretty far with slacking off in school and I guess partying and I
hmm.
don't know. I just wasn't very. I was pretty self-centered, egotistical, but also insecure and full of pride at some point. So it's a very bad mix of things as a kid.
It's hard
Um,
being a kid, I think. I don't
it's
know how it is in
really
the
hard.
Netherlands. I've only been here a little while, but in the States, there's so much weird pressure that you can't deal with. You don't
Yeah,
know what to do with it.
yeah. I mean, I think for every kid, there's a different hardship. Of course, we didn't have material or wealth hardship, but I wasn't a happy child. I don't think, and I find it like it almost feels like I shouldn't be able to say that
I
because my life in
understand.
many ways is so easy. It's like, what are you complaining about? But
But it's all relative to the context and the space and how you've developed. You know, you can't, especially as a kid, we can't. You're where you are, and there's no way to think outside of that yet. I mean, that's part of what you've learned how to do now, right?
yeah,
But I mean, we can't feel guilty about how we felt as kids. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. So, did you have any siblings growing up?
Yeah, I have a brother, a younger
Uh,
brother. I'm the oldest, and
and is he
I
much
also have two
younger?
stepbrothers. Hmm?
Is he much younger?
3 years, so it was kind
Yes.
of perfect.
And-
We were, best buddies because of all this moving. Often we'd move after a school year.
mhm.
So, you finish the school year, you move to a new place and you don't know anyone. So my brother and I would
Brother.
be best buddies, uh, just whatever, doing whatever. Yeah, I love him a lot. He's a really beautiful guy.
That's
Um,
awesome.
mhm.
Is he in the U.S. now?
Yeah, everyone's in the US. I'm the only one had any who kept moving. Everyone else sort of eventually got sick of moving and they've sort of stayed in one spot more or less. And I seem to have not been able to stop.
Are you sick of moving now?
I wouldn't say I'm sick of moving because I think part of the problem is I tend to love wherever I am because
Mm,
there's always so much new richness and it's about the people too. Um, and I'm in love and I'm happy here and like settling down is totally fine, and I'm ready. But I'm also, if we need to move, I can do it. There's probably something in that I should look at more closely with all this movement and how important it is to my
yeah,
work and everything. And yeah, but I I don't feel restless anymore, but I also don't feel like I need to move, except that
yeah,
I'm so far away from my family.
yeah. That I can imagine is difficult.
Mm,
And you had two stepbrothers, you said?
I do. Two wonderful stepbrothers came into my life a bit later, more when I was like into my teenage years when I was out doing all kind of crazy things and inside other very crazy worlds.
Tell me more.
Well, it's kind of an intense thing, so um, hmm.
If you're willing to share, otherwise you don't. It just sounded
No, I
interesting.
mean it's fine. Why not? It's just. Um, so when I was in my late teens or something, this will be a big shock to you, but someone approached me to be a model,
Oh yeah.
which I think because I just had such a weird face or something. And I ended up in New York a little bit, but I didn't go for that. I went for a scholarship internship, like you could do when you're really young. Anyway, all these reasons I ended up in New York in this kind of weird crowd of suddenly I was around a lot of famous people and completely kind of a shocker just happened. But also like this pattern of my life too, moving all these, I felt a bit like Zelig always. I ended up in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it happened in New York. And part of that, I fell in love with someone who was older and quite famous, or at least in that little world,
Mm-hmm.
we're all famous in our little worlds these days, I guess. But
Yeah.
for me at that moment, it was, like these were people my friends knew, my family knew, it was that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And yeah, it was real love too. It was not I had felt real love before for a man or for a person in a romantic way. But this was one of those things. I don't know what it is with you and your fiance, but like your body just changes when they're in the room suddenly, and like
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what's happening. It's almost like way beyond the spatio-temporal
Yeah.
effect is like way
For
beyond where
sure.
you can catch up, you know.
For sure.
It was one of those. So I had that, which would have already been world-changing, you know. And then there was this added thing of this fame world
Mm.
and this being so young. I mean, couldn't even drink alcohol, you know. I was
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
States. I was really young. And being in that world and trying to pretend like I was older because we'd go to
Mm.
bars, and
Yeah.
it was a lot of like kind of crazy, confusing uh time,
Mm.
so to speak. Why am I talking about this? What was the actual like direction that I need to head with all of this?
Well, it's very interesting. The direction was, I asked, you have two stepbrothers, and then you said you have two wonderful stepbrothers. And
Oh
then
yeah, but you asked me how that happened or something? Oh yeah, I said it
you said
was.
they came into my life at the time, like late teenage years, and then
Yeah, when it was
crazy
crazy, and you
times.
said, well, how crazy? That was the time. And so yeah, thanks for bringing me back to the thread. So uh in that same time period, my family was changing, the dynamics were changing, but I wasn't there. um I was in this other world, and selfish in a way that I didn't understand, just in the way you are when you're 19 or whatever I was.
Yeah.
Closed,
Yeah. Yeah.
focused. And yeah, that's when my family sort of disintegrated and I wasn't really around. And but then it also reformed in a beautiful way. So that was the crazy time period of my life when all of that happened. But also, as I was saying, they're beautiful humans, and I'm very thankful
Yeah.
for this big family. But as with everything, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of beauty, there was,
Yeah.
and it was a crazy time in my life. So that's the crazy time.
That's a lot of
One of them.
things. That's so interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
But tell me about if there's anything to say about the modeling. Did you like it?
It was terrible. I mean, because I liked it in a way because it made me I could play a role, and I didn't
Yeah.
play roles. I So there was something about similar to what I was describing about writing a poem, where
Mm-hmm.
you realize you can like go to a different place and look at yourself differently. There was
Yeah.
something interesting about that. Even just looking at a picture of yourself, and it's not you, and that they've made you look a way
Yeah.
that you don't look, but it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. And but on the other side, it was terrible because I was not ready to be told that my ears stick out, which they do, and that you get told all these everyone just tells you what's wrong with you when you go in.
Mm.
So that was kind of, but I didn't take it too seriously. I just kind of went with it, and I wasn't like I was going to become some famous model or something.
Mm-hmm.
I That wasn't the trajectory. It was just a little kind of, I just kind of got into it long enough to get swept away in this other universe,
Yeah.
And then I sort of left it behind.
Wow.
Have you ever
Uh,
been approached about that? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm under contract, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
All
was
right.
going to, well, I was scouted when I was 17 for this, and then they wanted to also send me to New York, actually. It's a funny parallel.
Yeah.
But that's
I'm
when
not surprised at all. Yeah.
this a lockdown type of stuff went
Oh,
down
that's when
then.
it happened.
Yeah. So I
Wow,
had
what
already told,
timing.
that's actually like, it was all perfect for me because that's what I wanted to do at the time. But then I was
Mm.
forced into isolation because I'd already told like my parents I'm not going to do university now because I was going to take the year off.
Wow,
And
fascinating.
then I got time to do a little self-inquiry.
Okay, tell me
That,
about that.
well, that led me to all the goodness in my life, basically,
Oh, wow.
because you have like a whole life of not questioning where you're going. And I just assumed I would study economics straight after high school and, the usual story. And that was the first time where it was like, okay, now you have nothing to do. You finish your high school, and yeah, we didn't know how long it was going to take. So I started thinking about what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the modeling, but I couldn't.
Hmm.
So I just figured I'd work as hard as possible on myself to get better, to be useful. Um,
Well, that's quite a decision to make. Especially that must have been a weird feeling where someone's almost offering you like a ticket into another universe,
yeah,
and then suddenly it's like, whoops, sorry, can't
it
do
is
it.
really
Must have been strange.
weird. It is super weird because like the modeling thing is also there's such a small percentage of people that get all of it, let's say, like that get all the
Mm.
jobs, and then there's a lot of models that don't. And it feels like you gotta strike luck once or twice to get into that. And so I was
Mm.
really close to that. Like I was almost gonna go to Paris for Vogue or whatever. And then none of that went through, and then the New York thing, and then none of that went through. And you're
Mm.
just stuck here. It's like, oh yeah, I'm almost. And that bothered me so much that I was like, I gotta become something independent of that. And so I quit the partying and the drinking and everything and start just living on my own and meditating and reading a lot and learning languages. And that was a really good time of my life, but a very imbalanced lifestyle, which did not allow room for a lot of personal relationships. So my family, relationships to my family suffered. I don't have any friends anymore from my childhood, pretty much. And
Mm.
but like I said, it did bring me all the goodness in my life because it completely rewired who I am. I started building a character anew, uh, building character anew, not a character. It's that I found out a bunch of things about myself and the world, and mostly about how little I know and
Mm.
how much there is to know and how wonderful it is to learn.
Yeah.
And so it was a great time in my life. And eventually in the lockdown, I did go to Milan for some castings and stuff.
Mm.
But it never really hit it off, to be honest. And then now I'm still under contract with people in Amsterdam because they
Okay.
liked my body type a bit more because I've always gone to the gym and they didn't want me to like be bigger.
Skinny or bigger.
They
Yeah.
wanted me to be skinny for like fashion stuff,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
didn't want that. So first I was like, okay, fine, I'll train maintenance for now.
Mm.
But that just started to bother me. So I was like, you guys are not offering me any jobs and it's not worth it for me. And I found out how much fun learning is. So I was like, let me train my brain and do
Wow.
something independent. Is it because you're so left to the whims of other people in that world. Like you have to, like I say, like strike luck and people have to like you. And like you say, it's kind of a terrible thing. Like they'll tell you what's wrong with you and they'll make a lot of
Yeah.
comments about your physique. It just feels weird.
I mean, people do that anyway, I guess, but when you're, I think it depends. I wouldn't say like modeling is bad or good, but it all depends on how you are coming at it and what your idea of yourself is at that time.
Mm,
And I mean, I wonder how you had the sort of poise to take that moment and make something good out of it, because
mm,
I guess we were probably around the same age, right? When it
yeah,
happened, because I was around 18 and I guess you were too when lockdown came,
yeah,
or yeah.
yeah.
So I don't remember. I don't remember feeling like I could. I mean, I remember being very present, but feeling like everything was kind of out of control or something. It was hard to take a minute and think about what to do next. Maybe COVID lockdown helped you do that, or maybe your parents, or maybe I don't, who knows, but it's kind of amazing to me that you could step back and then like redirect your energy into learning.
Yeah,
Some, was that part of like who helped you do that, or was that just you?
it is that I have a very I have a bit of an extreme personality where if I want to do something, I want to do it all the way or not at all.
Yeah,
So
me
that
too.
made me extremely lazy. Did you say you as
Mhm.
well?
Yeah, no, I want you to finish that thought, but I was thinking earlier to ask you about edge work or edges and stuff when you were talking about the partying and stuff, because I wonder about this personality of like wanting to fill the world full on.
Mm.
Uh, and if you kind of had that too, because then you went full on into learning too,
Yeah.
but you also
Yeah.
have this very peaceful demeanor too. So yeah, but
Yeah, no,
continue.
definitely. I was like, when I was a kid and people asked me what do you want to be, there was only like there were two answers. Either professional athlete or garbage man. That's it's always the two answers. If you ask my parents, that's all I ever
That's
said.
beautiful. That might be unique to you in the world,
Yeah,
that
because I
answer.
never wanted to like I either wanted to be something fully or if I was gonna be something in between, I hated that thought. So I just wanted to be something excellent. And I guess I realized in that time, like when I was 18, that there was another path to do that, like
Mm.
one that actually benefited other people. And I
Well, that
stopped.
service part is interesting in you too, eh? But I
Mm,
have to say too, garbage men and women are delightful and wonderful, and I think
absolutely.
might be the Zen teachers of the world, just to say it. So it's not like you were saying you want to just not do anything for your life, but it reminds me of more. When I was a kid, I thought like I want to be maybe I should be a nun or something, just so I can study and learn all the time,
Yeah.
or I'm just telling you this because it relates. One of my jobs was I want to work at the gas station store. I have no
Hmm.
idea because I thought, oh, you just do the same thing every day. You get to eat candy. But you could also like think about whatever you want or something. And maybe
Yeah.
that's kind of the, but
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanted to do a shout out of love for people who work in the industry of garbage.
I know. Absolutely. The more I
Uh,
learn about it, the more respect I have for these guys. Like,
yeah, totally.
it's like really cool
Mm.
stuff. Like, I've listened to a whole podcast with the garbage man from New York.
Oh, really? It
Yeah.
must be so fascinating, the
Super
life.
fascinating. Was a
Yeah,
comedian interviewing a New York garbage man. It's
you
just
have to send me that. That sounds
yeah, I'll
fascinating.
send it to you. It was really, really good talk.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the patience or whatever. How did you learn this? Whatever. The moment to
Um,
step back and.
I guess meditation was a big help for me. I've told my story a bit in the past, and I think what stands out is that I had a pretty big breaking point for like the partying and the drinking, where I would just have a night where I drank way too much and I blacked out for most of it. And I came home and was crying, and my father was there
Oh,
and I'm
gosh.
throwing up, and it's just a
Mm.
deep sense of shame. And then subsequently, me realizing that they still love me, my parents, and I was just not understanding that. And then I realized that that love was like infinite, like
Mm.
so powerful
Wow.
that anyone could have that. And it just made me want to repay as much as possible in terms of love and relationships. But then also, it made me, yeah, like I went from not being ambitious at all. Like even the word try hard is like an insult and was in my
Mm.
friend group. Like if you try hard for a test or whatever, you're just a
Mm-hmm.
loser. And I
Yeah,
just
I
wanted to do
understand.
the exact opposite. Like I wanted to try hard at everything.
Mm.
And so I think it partially has to do with my personality, partially the people on my path that helped me had really good guidance from my parents and yeah, my brother also, but my other siblings as well in other ways, more in leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them in different phases of their lives did very inspiring things in my view. And so yeah, I think that's about it.
I was trying to imagine, because this was like a long time ago, and there was not such a focus on meditation and yoga and all of these things quite yet. It was just kind of coming. I mean, even in New York. So I like to like what you said because it makes me think of at that time when I was 18 or 19, it might have helped a lot if I had just learned that practice of
Mm,
yeah, or also that what you said about your parents is beautiful, and that they showed you they still loved you even when you were in this coming showing first of all that you were in that state and they saw it. I find that very powerful because I don't think my parents have ever seen me vulnerable like that.
mm,
You know, I always keep that away so that you could share that with them and then they could uh just hold the space and love you. They've obviously had a lot of practice in meditation of some sort or prayer or love or whatever all this is that helps us hold that space. So
mm,
yeah, and lucky, you know, you said you have to be lucky to be
yeah,
a model, but you have to be lucky also to be able to find ways to hold that space. So
yeah.
I think that's kind of what philosophy taught me too, and poetry.
Mm,
Maybe that's what I was, because I didn't, my parents weren't really quite ready to help me when I was in that space. But I think the books and other people, you know, you look to other people who've gone through something similar and can
mm.
help you. But were your parents practice in this space holding already? I
My
guess with 5 kids, they had to be.
Yeah, both my parents are very good at connecting with people. My mother, she is not exactly a psychologist, but she speaks to people if they go to the GP and they have psychological issues, they go through
Oh,
her.
okay. Oh, wow.
And if
Yeah.
it's really serious, they're sent to a psychologist.
Okay.
But growing up, when I was growing up, she was also working as a volunteer for victims who went through things. And then she got a degree in grief and loss. And so she really knows how
Mhm.
to speak to people and to let them feel heard. And my father is extremely sensitive, cries at every movie he watches. And
Aw. Mhm.
so they've really taught me
Mhm.
to deal with feelings and emotions and that it's okay to feel them. So that's definitely been very helpful, I
I'm
would
glad to
say.
hear that. I'm glad that there's are people in the world. Mhm.
Yeah.
But that does sound like they were practicing too, that giving something and being of service, you know, to come back to that, how you
Mhm.
got that. I mean, it does sound like they were living that in the way that they could or
Yeah. Yeah. So that was very helpful. But I tried to hide all that from them. Like, I mean,
did
just
you?
like you said.
This was by accident, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I
Mhm.
was just so far off. And like my father, I guess, heard me throwing up. So,
Mhm.
but back to you. You are in New York. That's the crazy phase, at least. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, well, it
When
was
did?
a transitional moment, another one, but at a kind of higher musical scale of some sort. It was like, you know, vibrations were stronger.
Yeah. And what happened after that? And how long did that last?
Oh gosh, I'm terrible with time. So let me
It's
just say
okay.
right now, I won't tell you the right years about anything because I really don't live in the same
That's all
temporal.
good.
If you know me, you know this. I just, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I really don't know. It seems like it lasted a long time, but I was so young, it probably wasn't that long, some years.
Hmm.
And it changed my whole world because I was studying in university. It just first year, I'd just gotten there. I don't even know, had it just started? Yeah. And this was like a kind of internship between high school and college, maybe, or
Hmm.
anyway, it was really early on that I did it. And then, of course, I fell in love, and it was real love, and it was this other world. And he already had this whole life and inertia to that life. So it was, I think I tried to kind of resist it for a while and keep doing my own thing. But at some point, you just, when you're in love, you just want to be near the person you're in love with.
Yeah.
So a lot of it became floating along in his world, which was fascinating. But yeah, it was probably some years, and then I kind of had my breakdown some years after all that,
Uh,
where I had moved to be with him and hadn't really finished school. I was doing school. I had decided on philosophy, even though, yeah, I was doing it, but I would literally like take flights overnight to get to my university classes.
Oh.
Yeah, and like come after a red eye because we were living on the West Coast and my school was on the East Coast, so I would fly overnight, take my classes all day, like write my papers on the plane sometimes, and then fly back. It was completely nuts. I don't know what I was doing. But I hadn't finished school yet. I was just a few classes away, and I was in this world that was really rich and wonderful, actually full of really good people, but I just too deep. The waters were too deep for me.
Mm.
And being in love too, and you feel so out of control. Like, how can this person love me? You know, like who am I? And this is love in a way too, that you have to deal with all that. But all that was just too much. So I kind of had a moment similar to maybe the one you had with your parents, but I had it with my boyfriend at the time. And I just sort of fell apart and I was just like, I was drinking way too much.
Mm.
I don't drink much. I mean, I'm not good at it. So, uh, just drinking a little bit like puts me in quite a sensitive state.
Mm.
So I was drinking, I was trying to work like at a bookshop because I wasn't in love with books, and everything just wasn't, I wasn't able to do anything very well. I couldn't, the bookshop was hard because mostly because I was living in these two different worlds. I couldn't really tell anyone about my boyfriend because they would freak out, and it was like, so I was trying to like live one life as
Yeah.
bookshop seller and then the other life whatever. And I was trying
Yeah.
to write and I was trying to finish school and none of it was really, and I was drinking too much. So I had this kind of collapse like you had and with him. And wasn't that I didn't love him, but I really did. It was almost the opposite of that. It was just the waters were too deep. And I
Mm.
was like, I have to just go back like to New York and whatever. I just have to go. I have to like figure out if I can survive alone. And so
Yeah.
that's what I did. And that ended up in whole other, you know, universes and pains and pleasures and whatever. But I think I went deeper into the philosophy then. That's what became the raft. And I
Yeah.
I walked around New York, first drinking too much and meeting friends and being silly, but really more like in a Nietzsche kind of, I mean, I was in a Nietzsche
Yeah.
mindset. I was reading Nietzsche, I think, and I was just really wallowing in sort of the pain. And then I just was like, okay, this is not good. So I stopped drinking. I would walk miles and miles every day just not to drink. And I started doing the philosophy and I finished my degree and blah, blah, blah.
Blah blah blah. And you eventually ended up in Germany.
Yeah, so I'd always wanted to. So I decided the part I had to write was my master or my like honors. I was in all these honors programs and
Uh-huh.
I had to do an honors thesis. So I wanted to write it on Hegel. Yeah, maybe that was a problem. I was reading too much Hegel. But it was really about trying to, this beyond dichotomy theme that pops up a lot for me. Hegel was my, this dialectic is kind of generalized as dialectic or Aufheben, where you have two seeming opposites that then synthesize,
Yep.
this is all very general, but and then you have the new thing. Similar pattern to what I've been talking about with the poetry and with, all the stuff. I recognize it in his writing, but I was reading it in English.
Mm.
So I felt like kind of disingenuous that like I should know German or something.
Yeah.
And
But can I
I
ask you a
felt,
question about one
yeah,
word?
yeah. What?
Aufheben? Aufheben?
Yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
do you spell that?
Aufheben.
Aufheben.
It's
Okay.
probably a Dutch
Yeah,
equivalent,
usually
similar.
there's a Dutch equivalent, but I'm not finding
Yeah.
it. It's just
Okay.
you said it a couple times in the talks I listened to in preparation, but I couldn't figure it
I
out.
say it because I think it's better than it's usually just called dialectic or
Yeah, yeah.
synthesis, and that word is very rich because it can mean all these. There's many layers to it.
Mhm.
In terms of not being, it's more like a triangle or a geodesic kind of word in terms
Mhm.
of what's possible and the way that German is and
Yeah,
Dutch too a little bit, right? Where
yeah,
you can't do it in English, but
I understand.
yeah. So that's how I ended up. Actually, I'd already decided. When I was still in this relationship, we had gone to Berlin just for his work and gone to these kind of crazy clubs. Not crazy clubs. They were not crazy like raves or something. It was just very edgy. Like I love there that there was this non-binary feeling about the city
Mm,
and like everything was just really fluid at that in those years like and I wanted to go there to learn German. And I'd already told him and like we were going to go together maybe or I don't know. But I just went by myself once I got my act together after these long days in New York,
mm.
sobering up, and nobody knew about any of that. I don't even know if anyone knows in my family till now, but
Oh,
about the drinking and stuff. I just did
yeah,
it on my own,
yeah.
And then there were a lot of other things. I was working at a bookshop in New York. It's an old St. Mark's bookshop. It's closed, unfortunately, but it's a wonderful area in St. Mark's. It's really rich, like writers, actors, poets were always coming in. It was a wonderful time. I worked there with them. I kind of came back to life. I rehabilitated myself. Got to the point where I could finish my school, even though I was doing it. Yeah. Anyway, so then I went to Berlin, but after working, I did some other work too with like a producer's family. All this weird
Mm.
stuff was happening, but I was able to save up money on my own, and then I just went to Berlin to study German and try to learn the philosophy because it wasn't only Hegel. There's like a lot of German influence, even Nietzsche, as I was saying, and like Kafka. I always liked. I was kind of in that space at that age.
Yeah.
That space where you're just feeling all this heavy stuff and yeah. So, but then I ended up in Berlin, and then as usual, things took on a whole other route. But um, yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this crazy experience so far? Does it sound
It sounds
normal?
amazing. I like it. But it explains a lot about you in the sense that how multifaceted you are. There's also a lot of different chapters in your story. Um, so I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm listening with a smile on my face. I really like it. Like it's a really good, it's really
But
been
you can
very,
see it where I would started with this, even the waymaking stuff or navigabilities or all
yeah.
these paths, right? A lot of it's me trying to figure out how to understand a landscape that can be modeled or looked at from so many different perspectives. And I guess that is in all these stories, right? It's a pattern.
Hmm. It looks like you're trying to chase the truth wherever it follows. It's like a grand adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really cool.
Do you think of life like that? Or do you
Yeah,
think of it as an adventure or a
I do.
journey? Yeah.
I think so. Well, the thing is, I really love your work and the focus it is on. The sad thing is, it has this association with this university class I had, which is called
Oh.
area studies or something.
Oh.
And
Okay,
this
tell
is,
me more. And these are the things I need to know.
well, there's a university course that is obligatory uh, in my studies, and it's called area studies, and it does not seem to touch with reality at all,
Hmm.
in a sense that it seems to be one man's abstract thought
Oh,
patterns, where, which is not very
okay.
relevant, but it's something that pops into my mind sometimes when I think about. Um,
No, it's very relevant. And don't be afraid to say something that could seem critical because I really welcome that. So, what is about area studies and um, thinking about life as various ways that we make that connects? What did you have to study in area studies? It sounds kind of like you're looking at maps of landscapes from above, but what is
yeah, it
it?
was just like this idea of looking at area in many different ways.
Hmm.
But the problem with the course was simply that the only person that could decide what is good and not within that course was the guy.
Oh no.
You know what I mean? Like in a sense that
Yeah.
the only evaluation is the man himself.
Oh.
And so if he doesn't like the direction you took the word area or how you understood it, there was a problem.
Mm.
But it's not in no way a critique of of your work or way making. I actually really like it. It's kind of healing for me to to read your stuff and to listen because
But what's about, was the area studies about something? I don't understand what area studies is. It was
neither.
about,
That's just
oh,
the whole point. I have no
okay.
idea. It's like a course about um, anything that you could possibly link to the word area. So you
Okay,
could
so
have
you're linking this to the space and the landscape, and my
yeah.
whole focus on that. So you don't even want to like think about spaces and landscapes more or less because of these associations. Is
Oh,
that
I
why?
do. I really do. It's just
Okay.
something that popped into my mind. I shouldn't have even brought it up, but
No, I
it's
find it very interesting because, we only can imagine what we know. People say that a lot, and it's something I think about. And when we hear words, all of
mm,
us have different associations, and we all think we are experiencing them in the same way. And that's part
mm,
of what drives me, is to find language to help us understand that when you say area, or when I say area or space or landscape,
mm,
that for everyone it has a different connotation. For you, it has this one, and that's
yeah.
important. But like, the only way I can know that is if we share our trajectories
Yeah, I
of
understand.
those ideas. So for me, it's very important to hear
Yeah.
like that there is such a thing as area studies, and that uh I guess I know what you mean now that I think about it,
Yeah,
but
just a lot of people in the universities now there's some courses that seem to be um a little disconnected from reality. That
well,
just
that's
was
weird, isn't it, about education? I wonder what
yeah,
your brother would think about that too. Of Because a lot of people I talk to often say that the thing they really loved, they didn't get it in school when they had the subject. That
yeah,
somehow they got turned off from it, from
yeah,
being taught it in school. But what are we doing? Why do we do that?
yeah, I don't know. Like for example, just mathematics, I find it really beautiful, but
Mm,
I hated it as a child.
yeah, I
It's
can
just
understand that.
partially the way it's been taught, but also I was a lazy student, I guess, and so I wanted the easiest path possible.
I think mathematics is a good example for a lot of people because we don't understand that in a way it's so philosophical and so
Hmm.
rich and humanistic even, but you just learn. It's more like, I remember feeling like I loved geometry and those classes, partly for the teacher. A lot of this is also the teacher, right? Because they
Yeah,
opened it up in a
yeah,
way. But then classes like algebra and calculus, I just felt panicked. Like I need to learn a million formulas, and like I couldn't relate it to, it was more just like you need to memorize all this and don't miss the answer on the exam.
yeah. I I always wish that I was like prodigy in math or physics. Like it
Mhm.
seems that people that understand that and they understand philosophy, they have a really cool worldview. Um, Whereas a lot of times the one excludes the other for some reason.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think that kind of weakness in myself, that I've always, I know that I'm very esoteric, and like I lean more towards the big picture for sure.
Mm,
I'm always having to rein myself in. And it's part of why I did start to try to study math, and which is very hard, like t to train your mind that way. Or even in philosophy, I'm much more into what people might call continental philosophy,
mm,
but going into the analytic really deeply and learning the symbolic logic, that was hard for me, but to train my mind for exactly that reason too.
yeah,
Because I realize I'm so much more in the, everything is one, wholeness,
yeah,
esoteric land,
yeah.
and to try to
Cool.
bring it back, or even
Hmm.
when I did neuroscience, there were many reasons for that, but a lot of it was just retraining myself how to think about things
Hmm.
more mathematically or scientifically.
What made you do neuroscience?
There's a few. I'd always been turned on by thinking about the mind. I mean, that was, what is the mind? It goes back as far as I can remember to understand what's the physical body and how do we become sensually aware of it, and how do I end up thinking of myself as a self and all that. Um, and it's, there was a lot of focus on mind as brain, I guess. So I read a lot of books about that early. There's just those kind of crossing over books, Anatomy of Love. I don't know. There was a lot of different ones. Um, so I was reading it a lot when I was a teenager, and
Hmm.
then there were some issues in my family with people who struggled with what we call mental illnesses, but I believe they're physical too. I don't think those words are important and to
Yeah.
distinguish, but I don't see them as like in any way opposite. More,
Yeah.
yeah. So and that really affected me. And also, I was going through my own stuff, and you
Hmm.
you realize you develop a kind of wider empathy for kind of what we were just talking about before too, that I started to realize there's so many ways of being in the world, sensualities that I don't recognize in my daily life. A little bit like you said, you shouldn't talk about the pain you had as a kid because you're so lucky. And in a way, I felt like, oh, I'm so lucky in a sense. And there's probably people experiencing the same city of New York, which I was walking in such a different way from me. And how do I like figure that out? So that was all part of, I started reading about brain, like trying to get scientific, what I thought of as like the opposite of philosophy at that time,
Yeah.
scientific about it instead of just reading all the big ideas. And that's what led me to the neuroscience and wanting to understand and maybe help these people in my family. I mean, it's a bit idealistic, like I'm going to go study neuroscience and cure some issue, but
Yeah.
I think there was some motivation to, or just so you don't feel like helpless,
Understand. I wanted to do neuroscience also.
Did you?
No,
I was gonna
because
add,
I
yeah.
wanted but I didn't have biology because I was so lazy.
Mm.
I picked all the easy classes in my view, and so that excluded me from a lot of programs.
Well, easy for you. They might not have been easy for someone else, but yeah.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So
What was it about? Were you also interested in these themes? Because you're also, wanting to learn and like what I was talking about, expanding, going to the edges of what you
yeah,
know. How does that relate to, like, what do you think about these terms like cognition and brain and, the more sciencey side of it all?
I like the sciencey side. I don't take it
Mm-hmm.
too seriously, but I really like it. Like um, neuroscience to me is extremely fascinating, but to me it's more of a seeing how everything we do looks in a measured way.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't tell me so much about why we do the things we do or even how we necessarily work. But to me, neuroscience is interesting because it seems to show me exactly that, like what our actions look like and you know
Mm-hmm.
the way we remember. And I think it's a really fascinating thing. And science in
Mm-hmm.
general, I find it very valuable and very fascinating. But it doesn't have enough of my heart to pursue as a
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah career. But it's
Yeah,
cool.
it's hard. I mean, I also never, I knew I wasn't going to try to go into the lab and really be, it was, for me, it was much more how to understand it in a way that I could talk about it without feeling like an imposter or something. Like I needed to know it if I'm going to try to think about a framework.
Yeah,
If I'm going to be talking about, it was the same with the German. I needed to learn German if I was going to do a thesis on German philosophers,
yeah,
and I just felt like I need to at least try with the neuroscience if I'm going to be talking about issues of cognition and mind, and you know even if I'm just doing it philosophically, it was more
yeah.
that.
That's
But what
cool
you're
though.
saying, yeah, what you're saying is really interesting, because when you said like the person who's mathematically and philosophically
Talented.
talented
Yeah, yeah.
or fluid,
Able.
able to do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you mentioned measurement, and that's something Karen and I talked about, and
Hmm.
I wonder if that stuff is connected too for you in terms of like the religious or the philosophy or the bigger picture being kind of the richness, and then the math and the science feeling like the way we measure and model and assess
Yeah.
towards, and that balance, right? Someone who can hold that balance
Yeah.
and know both languages and not get too sucked into either one or the other. For
Yeah.
me, that's a real beautiful spot, which I'm always trying to get to and, never arriving at.
Yeah. That's why I love Wolfgang Smith.
Yeah.
'Cause he is that, like, starting in philosophy, was offered a fellowship and everything, but he really disliked the general atmosphere. One of his main project um before he got so old was like before at the last in his last years, one of the main projects he's been working on is to reinstall the original meaning of philosophy. Like his foundation is called Philosophia. Um,
Oh, beautiful.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't feel the philos and he didn't feel the Sophia in the philosophy department. So he ended up going for math and physics.
It's kind of why I call the channel love and philosophy, even though it's like love, love, but I think we need to remember the love, and,
Yeah.
and the Sophia. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But he does that. Like he really helped me see. Well, he basically said something really funny that I like. He said most physicists are terrible philosophers. And I think that's true. Because that's one of the things that, like, speaking about life as an adventure, um, I'm trying to follow what makes me feel a lot.
Mm.
And some things bother me. When one
Mm-hmm.
of those things is sometimes like more physics type people trying to make philosophical pronouncements. I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Even though I don't either, but I realized that based on the physical data, you can't make all these assumptions. And the particulars aren't even very
Yeah.
important here, but it's just something that's been done a lot.
Yeah, that's that spectrum of taking, like, clinging on, or being attached to the model and the math and thinking it's
Yeah,
the process and the territory, Like, I
yeah,
think I understand how that happens, and that I see it in science a lot too, where you're sort of, you have to choose those things, and then you kind of have to defend them just to survive in the world. And it's very easy to just think that you found the way, but there's
yeah.
no one way.
You seem to understand mind is movement. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, again, for me, there's this layered flipping. So you could also say movement as mind, and I
Okay.
don't necessarily mean that something that only things that move in the way that humans define movement are alive or
Yeah.
cognitive. So I have to be very careful in a really broad paintbrush way.
Uh-huh.
I do think mind and movement are the same. In terms of being is movement, being is way making, but I don't mean that, you have to go from a geographical point A to point B. Right now, we're doing a lot of movement through a lot of different statistically regular landscapes of language and also of our own experience. And those aren't things that are like geographical topology in a kind of everyday sense of that. But if we were skilled enough, we could create some kind of mathematics or model of that, because we could sort of trace everything that we've read and looked at and whatever up to this moment, and we could see how this conversation is emerging of those things from your trajectory and from mine.
Mm.
We don't have this, the tools to do that necessarily right now, but that's kind of more, the angle that I'm trying to come at or present, or I don't know. I'm sorry, my throat is
Yeah,
one
good.
second. Sorry about that.
All good.
Yeah.
So mind is movement and movement.
Well, so that's a movement, and there's movement in all these different layers, but
Yeah.
it's weird because when we say mind, we already assume our own mind. Um, so I also don't. I'm also trying to be careful not to define mind as one thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak of cognitions or intelligences with an S, uh, not just, that there's something called cognition, or there's something called intelligence, or there's something called mind.
Yeah.
And I think it gets to the same theme we're playing around a little bit with in terms of modeling and the process.
Yeah.
So I think when we use words like mind and intelligence and cognition, we're kind of modeling
Hmm.
a process that's dynamic and ongoing and manifests in so many different ways. So
Yeah.
we always have to we always have to look at what's the embodied perspective that we're
Hmm.
assessing. Because
Hmm.
I could, look at my dog's, try to understand my dog's mindset. Um, I'm still like I'm assessing it, and that's fine. But I need to understand I'm doing it. I'm taking a measurement from, and there's a certain body within a certain landscape, and
Yeah.
all of this needs to be sort of talked about, and then I can talk about her mind and her cognition. But that's too nuanced often. It's
Hmm.
often if I say my dog is thinking about something or my dog has cognition, we just think of it as human or our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So you're trying to also be aware of how non-objective we are. And so we are part of everything we're doing, let's say. And in that sense, dynamic and it's beyond. We speak a lot about beyond dichotomy and um, it's dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
where does,
Definitely.
yeah, where does
And also,
the,
yeah,
go
just
ahead.
yeah, and also that we don't, I think of something like plants or trees. I'm looking out the window. It's a beautiful day. We're both in the Netherlands. It's nice. And
Mm,
there's a kind people get caught up on debating whether this trees outside my window is has mind or is can be said as to be intelligent or
yeah,
something. And I feel like that's like a little bit like getting caught up on a math problem
yeah,
that you just want to solve in a certain way without, what's it going to do in the real world. It can be very interesting. It can even be really beneficial for helping your critical thinking develop. But when it comes to right now, I feel that we have so many challenges about how to how to be good and or not good, how to have a healthy, loving relationship with ourselves,
mm,
with those around us, and especially with all these other living creatures. This idea of what's intelligent or not, and then we have the whole AI thing. It's taken on a different kind of weight or urgency. So those nuances where we talk about something and assume, like, your idea of the area studies, right? Where we're both talking about one thing, but we're having completely different
yeah,
experiences of it. I feel like when that comes to something like cognition, intelligence is mind, right now it matters a lot that we try to untangle that stuff a little bit and
mm,
think about what are we really talking about and how can we understand that intelligence of a tree doesn't have to look anything at all like anything we've ever talked about in terms of intelligence of a human. And to talk about its intelligence isn't to equate it to the human. I mean, it's a really nuanced, right? And you have to do it in so many different levels. But I feel like if we can start to understand that or like think multidimensionally in that way as a habit. Right now, I feel like we think more and assume more in the dichotomous way. It's always one or the other
yeah,
without thinking about it, that it might
yep,
be helpful, right? It's
yeah,
just how can we kind of change the vibrations and patterns and habits and assumptions of our overall thought process in a way that not only like helps us understand self in a more sensual, exciting way for this embodied presence, but also might, help us solve some of these kind of urgencies that affect that self and our communities and so on.
yeah. It seems
What
like
do you?
trying to break free from the lens we're looking through, to break free from the frames that encompass our reality. So, I mean, like subject object, metaphysics, and Descartes. I think these are all examples of something that we're so used to thinking through that we're not realizing that we're actually doing that. Um, would that be correct to say?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I want to break free because I think there's it's accepting that they're frames and
Ah, yeah,
noticing like these are frames and they're very beautiful tools when they're used. Like think of how much has come out of this
yeah,
contrast, this way that we've been seeing the world, this pattern. I'm not saying it's wrong, even like zeros and ones and all that that's brought with technology. I don't think it's wrong. I just
yeah,
think it's like that we don't see it as a frame So we assume that's the way the world is. And so it
Yeah.
ends up, we all end up thinking we have an opposite and an enemy, and we're in groups rather than, can we have a more geodesic experience of self?
What does
Can
that
we
mean,
understand
geodesic?
geodesic? You know Buckminster Fuller? I was really thinking of him just now.
Yeah.
These yeah,
Well,
you
I
know
know the
Buck?
name, but I don't know exactly
Yeah,
what
I
the
mean,
term
it
is.
doesn't matter. There's so many names. But I'm sure you've seen these creations, these geodesic domes. They're built from triangle, the triangle being the most sturdy shape, the three, and they're these. I think that there's some kind of. A lot of them look like just circles of space. Like it's basically a way of building a house that's
Ah, I
not
see. Yeah.
not. Yeah, you see it. You just have to look it up. Um, yeah, but more geodesic. What I mean is instead of that two, like opening up to the multidimensionality of the three. You know,
Yeah.
a triangle has 3 points, but you could also, from each of those points, lead to two other points.
Yeah.
So that's the geodesic kind of way. So it's
Cool.
really just understanding. In this conversation, you and I are bringing certain parts of our self and our history, and those are real and those are authentic. But it's like, it's those two lines of the triangle meeting at this one point. And when you go and have a conversation with your fiance, your brother, the person at the store, you're bringing different parts, and so are they. And so there's more like you have more like a spectrum of ways of understanding how your cognition at that particular moment is manifesting as what it is.
Yeah.
And if you kind of can scale out and start to understand that what we think is a social group that's our enemy could be seen uh, from like outside of that enemy way, in a sense, in a way that would open up our own perspective. And it's not about like not, we can still disagree, and all of that is good, but you just start to develop some space to understand that what you think, it goes back to what we know is only, or what we can imagine is kind of determined by what we know. So
Yeah.
when you have a disagreement, or when you are wrong, or when someone knows something you don't know, that's not a reason to become defensive. That's a portal, a opening into like, oh, you can learn something, like you're going to add another triangle, or you're going to add another node, or you're going to add another edge. It's just a way of thinking. Right now we think if something challenging comes up, you need to defend yourself. What
Mm.
if we thought something challenging comes up, it's a portal to understand, to open up our sensuality and what's possible. It's just a
Yeah.
different way of thinking.
That's super cool.
Maybe
I re
meditation does that too, in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, it absolutely. Well, it reminds me of that a lot because talking about frames and um, a lot of. Let me make sure I'm speaking correctly because John Vervaeke always speaks about meditation and contemplation,
Oh, right.
but the two are different. And I
Mm,
think, okay, I'm just going to explain one of the ones, and I'm not sure if it's the right one, but it will probably come to
that's
me.
okay. You've said that you're not sure, so it's okay.
So it's about realizing that you're looking through glasses. That's the example he's always giving. I think that
Mm,
might be meditation, is that you're becoming aware of your thought patterns, you're becoming aware of the frame that you're thinking through. And so you're stepping back and you're like actually looking at the glasses and you're like, oh no, there's like a little speck here and there's a little
mm,
something there.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
that's beautiful. That's exactly like becoming aware that it's a frame. That's a
yeah,
huge shift. Yeah.
and then cleaning it up, putting the glasses back on. It's like, oh wow, what a
Yeah.
richness.
Right.
I think that those might be the two. I think contemplation might be the second one, but I'm not sure. Um, so yeah,
That reminds me of one of the very few things I think I know about Wolfgang
this,
Smith,
yeah.
and I'm not even sure. Maybe I'm wrong. So, but I feel like there's something about his stuff that talks about the body being a scientific instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
In quantum physics, yeah, like
yeah, or starting to understand that this embodied, we are a lens, and we
yes,
are looking through the lens,
yeah,
in that way that you just described.
yeah. It's really helpful. Like I was speaking about breaking frame because I think sometimes it can be really useful, but then you actually have to, you know, get you need a frame for reality. Same with language, you need to use it, but
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
improve ways of using it.
That's what I was trying to say when you said break out, because I don't feel like these things are bad. I just feel
Yeah,
like it's more like a scaling, a nestedness, getting away from thinking of things as beginning here and ending here on a line,
yeah,
and starting to understand, like the glasses thing is beautiful because you could also take the glasses off and put on a different pair of glasses, or like maybe you're going to put on some VR. I mean, like there's all kind of things you could use as your frame. But if you didn't know it was a frame, you would be like, the thing in Plato where the people are chained to the looking at the shadows on the wall and they think that's reality. So there's something about that process itself, and it not being only like a breathing in and out of one. You're not going always back to the same place. You're with every realization or every cleaning of the lenses, you're also changing the lenses and you're changing what's looking through them.
yeah. What is
So
if you're willing to share, what is sacred to you?
um gosh, what isn't sacred to me, when you really uh I think when you're really present and you're really in not judging yourself and not judging other people, and you're just present, which is what we try to learn, right? With sports or with meditation or with reading a good book, or, I think we're trying to get to that space of presence. And not even get there, it's just there, just relax into it, or be able to feel it. It can be hard to feel, it's a lot. I feel like everything is sacred, and it
Mhm.
can be overwhelming. I think this connects to a lot of different psychological kind of issues where we're physically embodied trying to get to a point where we can handle sacredness of the world. And a sacred, I don't mean that it's off limits to anyone. I mean the opposite. It's fully accessible and fully integrated, and fully everyone's, Um, I think it can be hard at times when I'm in that space to like walk down the street or do anything, because everything becomes so beautiful, and it's not that it's so beautiful. It's more that it's just infinitely rich and interesting, and yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what isn't sacred. That would be a question I would probably ask as
Mhm.
an answer to
That's
what is
good.
sacred.
That's excellent. Is there certain things that are more sacred than others, or do you think maybe I'm already applying the frame wrong, Like I'm thinking maybe in a subject object way, but I'm trying to see your view of everything as sacred, and I think I really get it. Is that because of the relationship you have to it, or is that the thing in itself?
Why
Is
don't
it
you tell me what you think of as sacred first? Like, of course you can't define the term absolutely, but kind of tell me what are you imagining when you say that word? Because maybe we also have,
I
different.
think human connection is sacred to me. So what we're doing right now, ritual is sacred to me. Also a very broad term. Both are extremely broad. I think I feel that sacredness is very present in my life when, like you said, when I'm very present. And
Mm.
so it's when I'm really feeling everything fully and I'm sensing the world around me, and I'm letting it show its fullness to me, its wholeness. That's sacred, I
Yeah, that
think.
sounds like love too, a bit,
Yeah,
and I see what you're saying, because, then like let's take something negative that we wouldn't say violence is sacred, for example, in that formulation of the word. But I guess, uh, you know, I think I would have to look really deeply into, not that I would ever say anything harmful is, it would be more that it's um it's you can't distinguish all of this and sort of say that there is just the violence, I guess, because that's coming out of a whole complex uh multidimensional world, and there's something about just me even calling it just, some kind of act that I wouldn't put those two together, but it's a bit like if I try to fold the paper and put the two sides together, you can do it, but I'm not sure it like adds anything for to try to separate my experience of the world being sacred from there being some human acts that are, to me, from my position, almost the opposite of that experience that I have of the
Hmm.
world as sacred, you
Yeah.
know? So it would be, it's almost like I can't, I guess what really comes to mind is what I would say is that it's the pattern that connects. Like, um, I think of love as that way too. Like when we're having a really good conversation, when we're reading something that really touches us, when we're in nature, our whatever this pattern is that we've called self, in order to understand it, uh, and whatever that pattern is that we're sensing as that self is connected, and it always is, and that's the love, and that's for me sacred. So that pattern is always connected. It's you can't ever disconnect it. But from this embodied sensual position that I'm in, I don't always feel that. And when I feel that, I would call it sacred. But yeah.
Beautiful. You speak about movement a lot. Do you have specific movement practices that you do?
I used to do Tai Chi. I used to get
Cool.
laughed at about it, like in New York, because all the like older people were doing Tai Chi, but I love Tai Chi. And I've had
Yeah.
some really spectacular moments. Like often, I don't know if you've ever had a lucid dream
No.
or tried to do that. I haven't had that many, and I haven't tried to. A lot of people try to kind of cultivate it, but I like my normal dreams and sleep. But it is a very cool experience. And often, if I've been doing Tai Chi, I'm more likely to have some kind of a lucid dream where I'm aware of myself as dreaming in the dream and doing something like flying or something. So yeah, it has to do with that flow. I like Tai Chi for that reason.
Hmm.
But I think, there's so many ways. I like to walk. I mean, walking is a really big thing for me. Are you a runner? Or you said,
I used to be
yeah.
extremely much of a runner, but that was just for like a year or two, and now I play football twice a week, so I do run a lot,
Okay.
but it's within
It's
the
a better
games.
way to get your running in. More fun.
It's definitely more fun, but there's something specific to running. It's like deep
Yeah.
internal journey going through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love sports, and I love really different forms of movement. I do
Mm,
think, I guess it gets to that pattern that connects, right? Can you change your vibration in a way that you kind of, your attention and awareness, those are important words when it comes to all these things. That flow state, or that when you can be moving and not and feel like you are flowing, that you didn't do that, you're not the initiator of the movement. There's something very wonderful about that comes through practices like Tai Chi or yoga or sports, or
mm,
because in everyday life we're so used to this inertia that it's hard to understand. It's hard to feel that the movement, I guess. In those cases, you feel you are the movement, right?
yeah. What do you
Speaking of
think?
which, we should probably do some of that movement in the sun today. I don't know.
Yeah, we
Or we
should.
can keep talking too. I mean, I'm happy, but I just realized
No, I want to be respectful of your time as much as
I'm
possible.
fine. I'm fine for a little bit longer, but I know it's a beautiful day, so if you have
Sounds
anything like what's on your mind, you feel free. I'm here, so.
okay. What do you think of the Netherlands? You've moved here in February, I think.
Yeah, it's very new to me. I'm going through all the processes of, learning Dutch and going through all that. I'm very grateful for the Netherlands because, for one, the man I'm completely in love with is born here.
Yeah.
So that's good. But also I have to say it's kind of like it's like I feel like it's a secret or something like that I discovered of how wonderful it is. Um, I just hadn't I'd only been to Amsterdam.
Hmm.
I hadn't like Utrecht is such a great city, which is where I live. Really, I almost hesitate to say it because it's like it's really a wonderful city, and
Yeah.
people only think of Amsterdam often in the States when they come to the Netherlands.
Yeah, that's really funny to me.
It is. Now it wasn't funny to me till I discovered your country, but I think I mean, I have the people have been wonderful. I love this city, and I was in Zeist for a little while just
Cool.
before here, which is nearby, and
Yeah.
I love that. All the forests nearby.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So my two experiences so far, Zeist and Utrecht, have been wonderful, and I really
Cool.
like it a lot. What do you think of the States?
I've never been, so I don't want
Okay.
to. Well, it's funny because our culture is in many ways pretty American, especially the one I grew up in because it's digital and TV and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's
But
different in real life too, of course.
yeah, so I really find it hard to say. People are
Mm,
very different opinions about the US, and I'd have to experience it for myself. And then also, there's a gigantic plurality within your country. I
that's
mean, it's
true.
literally 50 states. So
It's like asking, what do you think about Europe, or what do you? I mean, there's so
yeah,
many
yeah,
different.
it's
Yeah.
almost too diverse to say. But it's really cool you're here. And if you're ever going to The Hague or Leiden or anything close by, then let us know. And
Everything's close by in Holland, it seems,
yeah,
coming from the States.
yeah. So it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
but
So
I
let
will. Same here. If you're in Utrecht, or let me know.
sounds good. Yeah, I
Mm.
grew up actually in the province, Utrecht.
Oh, okay.
So my parents are
You
from
know
there.
it very well.
Yeah, pretty well. I think it's very cute. For people that don't know, it's like got a lot of canals and it's a historical city, and
Hmm.
it's extremely cute.
It
So
is. It's kind of what people love about Amsterdam, but at a more manageable or
yeah, yeah, that's why like I
different
was saying
level.
for Amsterdam because it's so busy, it's incredible.
Hmm.
For me, it's a little too much. So I
Yeah,
ended
big
up here.
cities.
But it's been really wonderful to talk to you. I'll say that even before we spoke, I told my fiance I'd love to have your accent. It's really so beautiful. Your voice. Do you sing at all?
Do I sing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not really, no.
I
I've
think you'd
never
be a
really
good
tried.
singer.
Thank you.
So
Try to
yeah,
sing in another way. Hmm?
sorry.
I just said thank you. I'll just take the compliment because
Uh,
I'm not so sure about that, but I won't, not I think it was Karen who told me, we can all learn to do these things like sing and
yeah,
draw and so on. So I'm sure I could learn, but
yeah. Karen learned. Karen learned to be an artist so late. She's really really incredible. It's funny you had
she's
that
she's a learner,
realization.
right? Talk
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
learning for your life. I love that. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
It's impossible that she's 75 or whatever the
I
age she
could
is.
not believe that when
No,
she
I had
told
the
me. I
same.
think it's even on camera, right? When
Yeah,
she
yeah,
told me, I
yeah,
was like, I really thought she was 40 something, or I don't know, 50 something.
yeah.
I don't know.
No, the same for me. So,
But
and she's always very modest about it. But
yeah, she's
yeah,
great.
again, it's been lovely to talk. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love to do it
Thanks
again.
for, asking me. I really love what you're doing. As I was saying, I think that you're having these conversations, that you're trying so hard to really, like, I don't know, even when you just take a minute and try to understand what you really think before you speak, and there's a lot to your process that I think is wonderful, and I'm glad you're doing it. And if I can help, just let me know. But yeah, I hope you keep having your conversations as you're having them, and exploring, and continue on your adventure.
Thank you. You too. Best of luck
Thanks.
with everything.
All right. Be well.
See you.
Bye.